Alright, so today I'll be talking a little bit about Alarak. Now, quick disclaimer at the start, Alarak is not one of my absolute mains like some of the other presentations were, but I still feel like I have a lot to say about the hero, and especially because I feel like the hero is very misunderstood and people misplay him a lot. So first of all, who am I? I am Mindhawk. I am a HOTS player. I play in low GM, High Masters. I dabble in Alarak a little bit, level 64, 300 games. I've played a little bit in Masters Clash. So today we're going to be talking about an overview of the hero. I'm going to talk about each ability separately. Where I'm going to be looking at the builds, a little bit about the power spikes, what makes Alarak strong, when can you take fights that you previously couldn't, etc. A little bit of tips and tricks, how do you use the hero, and then I'll have some time for questions, and we'll probably be looking a little bit in try mode for tips and tricks. So Alarak is a low wave clear hero. He is a melee assassin, but unlike a lot of other melee assassins, he lacks mobility and he lacks wave clear. He brings an engage to your team, but he does not bring a lot of frontline to your team. What do I mean with that is that Alarak can't really stay in the front. He's a combo mage. If Alarak plays a lot in the front, he tries to auto-attack like someone like a Kerrigan would. He doesn't have the sustain for that, he doesn't have the mobility for that. He will just die. Alarak has a very high skill cap, and Alarak also has one of the most punishing death mechanics in the game. And he also has surprisingly strong auto-attacks for the kind of hero that he is. However, due to his kit and how he has to position and the danger of dying and the punishment of dying, he has a very hard time actually using his auto attacks. It does make up a little bit for his very bad wave clear, because his auto attacks are simply like top 8 in the game. So his trait, sadism. A lot of people think about, I do so much damage to heroes. No, you don't. You do so little damage to non-heroes. Alarak's trait really just means that his wave clear is garbage, and that hurts on a hero. He has a very hard time macroing. He can do stuff like siege giants relatively well, but hitting minions is not something he loves to do. But that doesn't mean that you don't do it. As Alarak, you still a lot of the time have to hit minions, you have to clear waves, you have to help your team out. And a lot of the time you also just have to catch minions on the side. Because if you're playing Alarak, you are a damage slot and you fundamentally have to grab waves a lot of the time. E-build helps a lot on this, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Alarak's Q, Discord Strike, it is two things. It is follow-up and it is an interrupt. But it's also interruptible. So what I mean with that is if you're against someone with very quick CC, such as a Varian who can taunt you in an instant, such as Diablo who can heal you in an instant, you cannot Discord Strike reliably in melee range and never get interrupted. It's a little bit like Orphea Q, Orphea Chomp in that way, that you are quite vulnerable while using Discord Strike. Especially in the way that a lot of players like to use Discord Strike, which is to WQ. Alarak can get shut down really, really hard if people just decide to interrupt your Q. Especially if the people that you comboed can just turn around on you because they're not silenced. The CC that Discord Strike brings, the silence is fairly long, but it is just a silence. It does not prevent them from auto-attacking you, it doesn't prevent them from chasing you. It's also the only real mana eater in this kit. If you find yourself perpetually as Alarak, it is just your Q. Your W and E cost very little mana, but Q costs 55, which is more than your ult. W, Telekinesis. W is an extremely versatile ability. It can do so many things. you can follow up on your enemies, on your allies. You can use it to set up your allies. You can give a free target to your tank. You can peel for your tank. You can stop a variance E charge. You can toss people into immortal stuns. And a lot of the time, the only thing people use telekinesis for is W into Q, which is a very big shame. Now, I understand why, and I'll be talking a little bit about this in the build section, but you have to decouple W and Q in your mind when playing Alarak. You'll just not be using your W effectively if all you're using it for is WQ and sometimes as a self-cast W to escape. Alarak, when he doesn't have his W, as a hero is just really vulnerable. He doesn't have a very high health pool, he doesn't have sustain, he doesn't have high lifesteal. So be mindful when you use W, be mindful what you use it for. Especially because a lot of the time you can save your allies with it, but you can also accidentally give your enemy an engage with it. Especially if you W your tank into yourself or your teammates. But keep in mind, if all you're doing as Alarak is pressing WQ off cooldown, Kerrigan does that better because she has a stun, she has more mobility, and she has lifesteal. Alarak's E, Lightning Surge, is a very interesting ability, and it's one that no matter what build you're playing, you always have to be looking out for your E. You want to be using it off cooldown, and it's a very skill testing ability. And what I mean with that is that hitting E's can be very hard. The hitbox on hitting an E on a minion that is next to an enemy hero can be very finicky. The amount of time that you have to be looking for E, which is once every 6 seconds while not inting your positioning, can be very hard. But it's also, if you only hit 2 people with it every time instead of 1, not only are you dealing 50% more damage to the heroes in the middle, you're also healing yourself for double the amount. So the more you can get your E's to be multi-hits every single time, the stronger you will be in lane. Or doing objective poke or whatever. Alarak's ult, Deadly Charge. It is a very niche ability. It's a strong damage ability, it does quite a lot of burst, but it also has very glaring weaknesses. One of which being that Alarak is not a dive hero. If Alarak dives the enemy team and the enemy team does not die to him, he's screwed. And if Alarak then dies once, he loses all his sadism, and then he can't kill anyone anymore, which makes every subsequent Deadly Charge even worse. There are other ways to use Deadly Charge than just diving into the enemy team. You can use it as an escape, you can use it as a short, as a follow-up to your own W, in fact. The wind-up is short enough that a lot of heroes can't interrupt your R with their auto-attacks because they auto-attack too slowly. But I really don't recommend picking Deadly Charge in general because it clashes so hard with what Alarak as a hero wants to do. Unless you have a combo in your team composition, such as we saw a while ago, we saw Deadly Charge into Light Bomb. But that team comp falls apart if a Light Bomb Deadly Charge does not win you the team fight. Because if Alarak gets turned around on, he is screwed. The next ult, Counter-Strike, is everything Alarak actually wants. The main thing that Alarak will die to is either CC or displacement. And Counter-Strike being an unstoppable is really, really strong. You can counter a loop with it, you can counter Junkrat boop with it, you can counter the tiny boop that Riptire does, etc. But a lot of players also use Counter-Strike as a panic button when they're at 10% health. And keep in mind, you cannot use Counter-Strike when you're at 10% health, because any subsequent damage after the Counter-Strike will immediately murder you. Counter-Strike wants to be used very early in a fight to dodge one of the opening CC shots from the enemy, or to dodge an ult. You don't want to use this as your "oh shit, I fucked up" panic button when you're at 20% health in the enemy backline because you took Deadly Charge at level 20 and inted. Counter-Strike needs to be used very precisely. You can also use it as a burst tool. If someone is fleeing, you're about to end the fight, nothing's going to happen after that, you can use it to deny an enemy an escape path or to snipe them from long range. If there is something around you that is going to be providing one tick of damage, sometimes stuff like Aspen and W can do that, but keep in mind that is not the primary use for Counter-Strike. The primary use of Counter-Strike is to dodge CC. Now, a little bit about builds. Alarak has two fundamental builds. There is a kind of separate build in the W build. I'm going to talk about it, but it's bad, trust me. And we have E build. But first, combo build. This build has a very simple plan. You W, Q, E enemies, and sometimes that murders them. A lot of the time it leaves them in bad shape. It's the easiest to play. You get constant engages. Your W and Q combo, using them together, becomes a lot more effective because while you're above 80% health, your W and Q cooldown are very close. And it's very flashy because sometimes you get this big monster wombo combo that kills 2 enemy heroes and you feel very good because you were 3 levels up and you had 200% sadism because you were farming them the entire game. But it also baits you into bad play. When you have Show of Force, you want to use W, Q, E every single time, which means that you aren't looking to use your E off cooldown. You aren't looking to use your W in a different way than to set up your Q. And as I've talked about before, that's a real shame because W can be extremely strong when used in other ways as well. You'll notice that I have the level 13 tier not selected. I'll talk about those in a little bit. I also only have one level 20 selected, Hasty Bargain. Now, Hasty Bargain is an extremely strong tool, and I'll show why in just a little bit. But especially in this build, it is basically doubling you as a hero, because in this build, you WQE and you have no more impact for the rest of the fight. With Hasty Bargain, you get that to do that twice, and you get to deal double the burst. This level 16s on this tier or in this build are a little iffy. The main level 16 that you will pick most of the time is the auto attacks are empowered by hitting Q. In the case that you don't hit your Q, you don't have a 16 talent and you have to disengage from the fight, except that you just use your W and you have a hard time doing that. However, Alarak has a very hard time auto-attacking. You can do some very disgusting bursts to a lot of heroes. You can 1v1 a lot of heroes sometimes with the build, but it's very unreliable. And that's the main thing. If you're auto-attacking as Alarak, you're just very vulnerable. You only have 2 cooldowns that are defensive, and you have nothing outside of that. That's why sometimes I would recommend E16, which even in this build gives a lot of self-sustain and even a little bit of burst, because if you have high sadism, E16 heals for a lot when you're hitting multiple targets. You can easily heal up to 6 E's worth of healing in one single E rotation. And Mocking Strikes helps you if you have an easy to hit frontline that isn't threatening you. But keep in mind that's fairly niche. Now the build that I would recommend, but that is a lot harder to play, is E-build. It's a very, very mechanically intensive build because if you're not using your E off cooldown correctly to get impact every single E, it's very easy to either just be a stat farmer or do nothing. If you try to play E-build the way you would play combo build, you kind of do nothing. Because your combos are a lot less strong in this build, they do a lot less damage, and the main thing this build does so much better is the level 4 provides you with wave clear, which is a very big bonus, and you can constantly slow enemies from a very high range. Keep in mind that in this build, you don't use your WQ together. A lot of the time, your E slow from your level 1 can be enough to guarantee your Q hit in the first place. You also, a lot of time post 16, want to use your W to get your E out, your double E out in the first place, either to build stacks or just to burst for an insane amount. When you have 60, 70 E4 stacks, you hit like a truck. Now a little bit about Alarak's 13s. All of Alarak's 13s fundamentally do the same thing. They give you sadism. Now what does sadism do? It gives you burst and it gives you self-sustain. Self-sustain is very nice for Alarak. He doesn't have too much of it, and it can be very volatile depending on if you hit 1 or 2 targets with your E every time, for example. But 2 of the sadism talents have a bit of an issue. Blade of the High Lord requires you to auto-attack for sadism. Auto-attacking can be extremely awkward for Alarak. If you're auto-attacking onto enemies that have any sort of punishment for you, you basically can't use your W, or you get engaged on and die. Rite of Rekshir has a very similar issue. You can get a lot of sadism from Rite of Rekshir when you're winning or air-ramming, but you can also very easily be baited into chasing the target with Rite of Rekshir, or only focusing or only comboing the target that you have Rite of Rekshir on, instead of a target that actually matters in that team fight. It also baits you into using WQ non-stop, just like Show of Force does. And again, as I'll talk about a little bit more later, W can be used for so much more than just WQ. Pure Malice is the only talent that does something when you are not ahead. And with Alarak, it is very easy to die once and not ever come back into the game because you were behind and you are behind. When you have Blade of the High Lord and you die once, you lose all your sadism. You're not threatening anymore. People can counter-engage on you without dying. Your combos don't kill anyone anymore. And you find yourself unable to auto-attack at all. Same thing with Rite of Rekshir. You also lose a lot of your self-sustain. If you're ahead, usually Alarak already gets a lot of sadism from his from his innate trait quest, which gives you 30% sadism for getting 10 kills in total. You also get sadism from Show of Force if you've picked that. Having all of your eggs be in the same basket, only getting sadism when you're super far ahead, can be very, very awkward, because as soon as you fall a little bit behind, you have no catch-up whatsoever. That's why I like to recommend Pure Malice a lot more, even though it's the talent that you're like, well, it didn't do anything this game because I was winning. Well, you didn't need it. Power spikes. So Alarak has 3 very big power spikes, in my opinion. The biggest power spike is his ult. It allows you to position and combo so much more aggressively, because before level 10, every single time you use your W, you are a sitting duck for 12 seconds. At level 7, you get applied force, which is a really, really big bonus to your hero. Your engage range becomes bigger than a lot of other heroes' engage range, which means that you no longer threatened by enemy heroes that you are looking to combo or looking to throw into your enemies. At level 20, you double your entire rotation, which is really, really big. And level 4 is usually your build definer. Either it's Show of Force or it's your E4. Now there's one thing we haven't talked about in combo build, and that is Q4, Chaos Reigns. which if you hit 2 heroes with your Q gives you 60 bonus damage. If you hit 15 heroes in total, you get another 60. And if you hit 3 in a single Q, you get 120 bonus damage. An additional 120? I think so. Wait, let me double check. A bonus 100 damage. In addition to the other rewards. This talent, when it works, is strong. When it doesn't work, it's completely useless. And that's a big issue. Alarak is already a hero that, when strong, is strong, and when weak, is useless. But Q4 baits you into constantly looking for big 3-man queues, standing around way too many heroes that you can, way more heroes than you can take on. And a lot of the time you will kill yourself trying to look for a big Q hit. And the only reason you're looking for a big Q hit is to finish a quest. This is really, really awkward. I have seen too many Alaraks kill themselves and lose all their sadism and thus all their game impact in this build because they were taking Q4. And in general, I would just not recommend Q4. In the games that Q4 works, you will also get a lot of Show of Force stacks, or they're so clumped up that you would just get a shit ton of E stacks instead. Now, tips and tricks, I've already talked about this, but Q and W can be used independently. Your Q does not have to follow up your W. It just so happens that your W is an engage and your Q is a follow-up. However, if you're Muradin, Stormbolt's an enemy hero, you don't have to W that enemy hero towards you to press Q. If you're close enough to the Muradin, you can just press Q. The range is actually fairly long. And if you still have your W, say that enemy hero tries to use an escape, you can W them through the Muradin and then he can body block them, for example. That's a really big thing. Or you can use your W to throw people into your mouth route, which will sleep them afterwards. And when they wake, and just before they're about to wake up to either an ally CC or because the duration is about to run out, you can Q them and keep them CC for even longer. Same thing with May W and Immortal Stuns. You can also just telekinesis enemies towards your tank to let them do the engage, and you could follow up on your tank's engage with another Q. Keep in mind, if you W Q with no one around, usually nothing is going to happen. Another thing is that a lot of the time when you are Wing people, you can sneak in a couple of auto attacks, and Alarak's auto attacks are surprisingly good. Don't forget your auto attacks before level 16 as well. Any questions so far? I'll be going into try mode and showing off a couple of things afterwards.
What are your feelings about the Q talent on level 1? I've seen that picked a lot.
The Q talent on level 1. So I've talked about how Alarak has a very hard time auto-attacking, right? And the Q talent on level 1 has a very similar issue. If you're not in the solo lane, Alarak cannot auto-attack a lot. If you're near 4 enemy heroes, on a hero like Alarak where you only have 1 mobility every 12 seconds, auto-attacking off cooldown is a death sentence. Who are you going to auto-attack? Their backline? Their tank? Their tank has an CC ability to murder you. Their backline, if you're that far up and you don't have any mobility, you're completely screwed. And if you're comboing someone, you only get a couple of auto attacks in the first place. So in the cases that someone will just stand there and auto attack you back when you combo them, Q1 is okay. But that fundamentally requires your enemy to be playing really poorly. Because a lot of heroes simply outrange Alarak. They have more mobility than Alarak. They can CC Alarak. So the one place where Q1 has a niche is in the solo lane if you're hitting someone in a 1v1 and auto-attacking a lot. Now, at the start, I explained Alarak's trait makes him shit at clearing minions. And what is the thing a solo laner really needs to do 90% of the time? Is hitting minions, clearing waves, fixing rotations. Alarak is bad at all of those. His bush check is pretty bad. His abilities to rotate as a direct result of that can also be very easily interrupted. He can't clear a wave fast. All of these factors make it really tough for Alarak to solo lane. And his only sustain is on his E, which if the enemy hero isn't playing ball, unlike when you're, say, a Thrall, you cannot heal up at all. You have to Harf, tap, or call your healer over, which are not ideal either. I hope that answers your question about Q1.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
Excuse me, can you please show the E build again?
This presentation will be posted in chat later.
Yeah, I was thinking about, like, what about the W slow on 7? I mean, it may have some positive sides with, like, this sort of poke style of play.
So if we're talking about the combo build, right? You need the engage range on your W7. In the very rare case that you do not, you might sometimes want the Q silence, which is why I have it highlighted. But that is rare, so rare that it's arguable that it's even highlighted. But in the E build, if you're engaging on someone, you should not be engaging on them with your W in this build, but with your E, which has a slow built in. Your E, when you hit someone in the center of it, slows by 40% for 2 seconds, which is stronger than hindered motion's 30%. So, and because slows don't overlap in any way, the issue with hindered motion in this build is that it overlaps.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I kind of forgot that E is actually slow as well.
And that's a very big thing about this build as well, that you don't have to think about your Q as follow-up. You can also just use a lot of Ws to set up your E, get stacks, slow someone, and in the process set them up for your tank, for example. Any other questions?
I was wondering about level 20 as well. Like, some people pick Last Laugh, like it's basically like potentially another, tool of mobility to save yourself. So what do you think about the other alternatives?
So I'll be switching over to the in-game screen share for this one. And be talking a little bit about that. So this is combo build. Now, if we're combo build and we want to engage on a front line, you don't want to use Last Laugh for it, right? Because it's your only escape. In that case. And Alarak lacks escapes in the first place. So you do your engage and you do your thing. And let's say it turns bad. If you have Last Laugh, you teleport away. Maybe you poke a little bit with E. And then any random damage on the map, an Abathur Mine, a Tyrande Owl, someone that chased you, a stray Genji Q, will just completely screw you. Now, the alternative to that is that in this very same case, you get your combo out, and let's say it goes bad again. So let's say I missed combo or something. I can W myself away and have a Q and E reset. Or
I agree with this decision.
I can go for a combo, and I can go for another combo. The versatility of Hasty Bargain, which allows you to do both the escape part and the re-engage part, is what makes it a lot stronger than Last Laugh. Now, the other part is Last Laugh can really bait you into engaging into really bad fights. But the actual utility of Last Laugh, where it can save you from things that you otherwise couldn't survive through, is really just fixed by better Counter-Strike usage and better telekinesis usage, which is why I don't like Last Laugh pretty fundamentally, to be honest. I also feel like the idea of using Last Laugh to teleport into the backline and do a combo has the exact same problem that Deadly Charge does, except even worse. And that is because when you use Last Laugh to teleport into the backline, you are a sitting duck because you use your W to engage. Alarak does not want to be playing in the enemy's backline, especially not in this build. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, pretty much. Thanks.
Any other questions? I got a ping.
His best and worst maps. Mostly the worst. That's what I'm interested in.
Alright, I'll get to that in a little bit, but first we have a question from Dr. Logan. Why should I play Alarak over the Lost Vikings? Consult your local doctor. You need glasses. No. Not even close to the same thing. Good and bad maps. Alarak does not like big maps, macro-heavy maps. Maps where you have to do a lot of camps, maps where you have to do a lot of wave clear. So on the maps like Sky Temple, on the maps like Cursed Hollow, and on maps like arguably Volskaya, where rotation is important, and maps like Tomb, where rotations are important, where wave clear is important, where priority is important, where the objective doesn't push for you, where you have to get very deep into enemy territory a lot to actually get stuff done, which is the case when you're pushing manually, for example, on Cursed Hollow. Alarak can be very awkward and very dependent on his team, basically, right? Because you don't bring the wave clear that a typical pick from your position would do. But if you're playing it on a map like Dragonshire, where the Dragonite will push for you, rotations aren't as important. You can play more focused on the lane control, anchoring, for example. That's where Alarak is a lot better. And the signature best map for Alarak is Battlefield of Eternity. And there's a very simple reason for that, and that's because Alarak can combo so well with the Immortal stuns, both while defending your Immortal as well as pushing with your Immortal. Because anytime your Immortal throws out a stun, you can throw enemies into that stun, whether that's the defensive Immortal phase or whether that is you got the Immortal and you're racing with it. Not only that, but Alarak for combo mage has fairly decent auto attack DPS. Alarak is not one of the worst racers. If we actually look at Alarak's DPS, yes, his wave clear sucks. His abilities do half damage to structures, but his actual auto attack DPS is fairly high. He does 156 damage at level 1 every 1.2 times per second. And that is actually on the very high side of things. So if we look at similar heroes who do we think has fairly high auto attack DPS? Like a Kerrigan. So quick calculator. Alarak does roughly 187 DPS with his auto attacks alone. Now, if we take a fairly similar spot as a hero, Kerrigan does 120 damage per auto attack every 1.25 seconds, which is 149 DPS. And I would consider Kerrigan to be a very strong auto attack hero in general. And then if we look to the other mages, who are actual mages, such as Li Ming. Li Ming does a measly 65.5 damage every 1 second. So Alarak has 3 times more auto attack damage than Li Ming. Now of course Li Ming is a better racer overall because her Q does so much damage and because her W does a lot of damage. But that doesn't mean that Alarak is very bad at single target DPS or racing. And he's pretty underestimated with his race on the map, I would say. He provides more than you would expect based on his trait being so garbage.
Do you, if you have Alarak on Battlefield or Eternity, do you want to use him to defend, to telekinesis people into your friendly mortal stun?
Yes, Alarak definitely wants to be playing around his immortal, just because he can abuse it so hard. In the case that, say, you want to teamfight around your immortal, the enemy team is completely backing off, Alarak can be one of the first heroes over your tank, for example, to go to your immortal and add that extra raise because the enemy team is dead or low on health, etc. But usually, if you're playing Alarak, your game plan wants to be something like a 1-4 where you have one person racing and Alarak plus 3 other people defending. Because he abuses the immortal stun so well. The one awkward thing about Alarak on BoE is that if you lose the immortal, he doesn't do a lot in the defense. He cannot hit the immortal while defending safely. Because if you step out all the way to the immortal, their tank can just hit you back. What do you do as Alarak versus the Lost Vikings? What does your team do? Combining Alarak is bad with Ming, true or false? What do you do as Alarak versus Vikings?
Choose a talent.
Alarak is a bit awkward versus Vikings because a Vikings comp usually pushes really hard and Alarak's anti-siege is a bit eh. But the Vikings draft also often has a roaming 4-man, and if Alarak is able to match that 4-man, E-build gets a lot of stacks, for example. And you can also very quickly kill a Viking if you ever encounters one. But Alarak should not be a hero that constantly chases Vikings around the map. That's a very bad idea for Alarak. Alarak and Ming are have a little bit of the same issue where both a little bit feast or famine, which means that if you're behind with Alarak and Ming, you really have nothing to do if you're ever behind. You both have very shit wave clear. You're both dependent on big moments, getting a kill as Li Ming to get a reset, having your combo be meaningful to get a kill on Alarak. Which if you're behind, it's a lot harder to get a kill from a combo, and if you're behind, it's a lot harder to get a reset on Li Ming. So while they're not unplayable together, I wouldn't recommend them together. For those reasons.
Yeah, so I usually they say that Alarak basically should be classified as a mage, and when you have 2 mages, you're like become too cooldown dependent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably better to draft like sustained damage dealer as a second one.
The most important part, in my opinion, is that your second damage dealer has wave clear. Because Alarak lacks it so hard. Is Alarak a good choice to solo? Nope. On Braxis, he just cries when the Zerg wave arrives. He doesn't really win point control fights. So on Dragonchar Braxis, he's just not a good solo. I would not recommend him there. If you only play Alarak and you suck at everything else, then yeah. I guess he's better than something you literally can't play, but oh, sorry, the questions are being asked in general chat in CCS for people who have missed it. Voy would like you to move to Dev Day questions, because that's where they're usually being asked. Anything else?
What are good drafts for Alarak? Any notable synergies? And then on the opposite side, what do you not want to draft Alarak into?
Mm-hmm. So if we're looking at notable synergies, right? I mentioned two before, and those are heroes, healers, healers or tanks with strong CC that can be unreliable. So if we're looking at Mei usually has to go in quite deep and int herself with icing to confirm a blizzard hit, for example. But if Mei just tosses down blizzards next to an Alarak can just W someone into the blizzard for no cost at all every single time, especially post level 7 where he gets the extra range. And Mei Alarak can be very strong for that reason. It also helps that Mage as a hero brings a little bit more wave clear than normal tanks, which can help make up for Alarak's lack of wave clear. Another one is Malfurion. Entangling Roots is very, very, very strong when it hits, but it is unreliable. So if you're able to just throw people into Malf's carpet every single time, Malf gets obscenely infuriating to play against. Because anytime you're next to a Malf root, you're getting thrown into it. Other types of heroes that Alarak is nice with is, for example, a Junkrat. You can throw people into traps, you can set them up for boops. Junkrat provides a lot of wave clear that Alarak misses. So Junkrat Alarak is also a very nice combo. Generally, anyone who you can abuse telekinesis with, and anyone that can help make up for his weaknesses, are things that I'd be looking for in a draft. Now, if you're trying to counter Alarak, if you want to make Alarak stay miserable, anything that you can use after he uses Counter-Strike, for example, can really screw with him. If you're a Li Ming and Alarak presses Counter-Strike, it's a free combo for you every time. If you're a tank and Alarak uses Counter-Strike prematurely, you can just CC him, and he doesn't have a W most of the time because he's using Counter-Strike after your combo, after his WQ combo. Out macroing an Alarak draft is also very good. A lot of the time, if you're just going to brawl into an Alarak, that's exactly what he wants. He has a lot of hero-related quests. He has a lot of quest talents. He does double damage to heroes. So if you change the game to be about minions and to be about catching up to your rotations or facing, say, a lot of camps barreling down the lane, that's also really good into Alarak. A lot of heroes that Alarak are good with are also good into Alarak. So if you're playing Mei or Malf or Junkrat, Alarak also hates playing into you. Junkrat can simply outpoke the Alarak. Outpoke is health regeneration and boop him right after a counter strike, or if he's standing still too long for his Q in general, he can interrupt it. Other heroes that are really good against Alarak are anything that can punish him for using a combo on them, or anything that can very reliably interrupt his Q. So if Alarak combos, say, a Garrosh, Garrosh can just hold E, spam E, and throw the Alarak onto his team before his Q even gets out onto the Garrosh. On the other hand, Diablo can just Q the Alarak every time he tries to press Q, and bang him into a wall, forcing him to use Counter-Strike, and you can flip him immediately after. If someone like Arthas also ever gets onto Alarak, there's just nothing he can do. Fairly similarly to Kerrigan, if Alarak is movement speed slowed and he has used his one mobility tool, he's screwed. I think those are the primary things to talk about when we're talking about countering with and comboing with Alarak. Fish, double check me. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Would someone like Medivh or Uther be good to save people from combos?
Yeah, anything that can save people from his combo being reliable is also a very good choice. Especially if he's playing the combo build, which again, I don't actually recommend if you're really trying to get into Alarak. If you're really trying to get good at Alarak, if you're trying to be a one-trick, if you're trying to force him into every situation, E-build will perform so much better than the combo build. Not only because you don't lose your impact upon dying, but you get a lot of wave clear attached to your hero. You get a lot of more utility attached to your hero. But if Alarak's game plan is, I combo someone, they die, and we snowball the teamfight off of that, if you can give them armor with an overQ, if you can save them with a Brightwing Pixie Dust, if you can cleanse them, if you can toss a stun into them immediately after he uses his combo, because he is forced to stand still with it, or if he has to walk through a lurking arm, for example. These are the things that really screw that Alarak playstyle up completely. And especially if we're talking about completely shutting down Alarak, Brightwing as a hero has all of the things that shut Alarak down. She has Polymorph, which can interrupt his Q. She has Spell Armor, which can shut down his combo. She's very hard to catch out. She can blink out of his combo if she's ever caught herself. And if Alarak ever tries to force, say, a gank, because then he can actually use his auto attacks, she can also save from there. And similarly, Medivh, if Alarak combos someone that is Medivh shielded, the Arcane Explosion that's going to hurt Alarak afterwards is usually going to be enough to kill him with a little bit of extra damage and focus. That being said, Alarak against Medivh does have a lot of portal control. Because if Medivh ever overextends himself, he is a very viable target for Alarak to target. So I wouldn't recommend against picking Medivh for that reason if you're not a very experienced Medivh.
Go off that. Who else does Alarak counter well?
Who does Alarak counter well?
Yeah, like you see that team. What do you think? This is a free Alarak game.
Anyone who is looking for one-dimensional engages, right? So anyone who has a fairly telegraphed engage, like Butcher, most of the melee assassins, if there is something that pulls them in and stuns them with their very low health pool already, they're just completely screwed. Most of the ranged assassin cast, if they're ever caught in a combo, keel over and die. So if you're a Hanzo and you get comboed, you cannot D out, you don't have any mobility, you die. If you're a Junkrat, you just simply don't have the health pool. If you're a Genji, you ever E in, even if you get your deflect, you can get pulled into an enemy CC, you can get hit by Alarak Q, you die. So a lot of the time, if the enemy doesn't have strong peel, if the enemy has a weak front line, that's when Alarak gets a lot better. If we're looking at the tanks, Alarak performs quite poorly against basically all of them except maybe ETC. There just isn't something he can do against them. They shut him down too hard, they have the health pool to not care about his shit. On the other hand, against specifically heroes like Imperius, who are have telegraphed engages, who stand still a lot, Alarak also is very strong. And this includes anything that is channeled, right? Any sort of channel, Alarak has a very, very easy time interrupting channels at range because his telekinesis, if we actually go into Alarak, his telekinesis has both its cast range and then its effect range. You add them together because Alarak can interrupt objectives from a very long distance. So if we look before level 7, Alarak can interrupt a channeling objective from this far away, and at level 7, he can do it from this far away. However, anything that is a still standing channel can be interrupted from basically the other side of the map. If you look at this range, right? This is a very long interrupt. But that's also not just channels, it's a lot of, not just objective channels, but a lot of hero channels. If you're a Mephisto trying to consume souls, first of all, why are you picking consume souls? You suck. But second of all, Alarak has a very easy time interrupting that. And for example, Tyrael Sanctification. If he ever tries to sank, if he ever tries to sank, Alarak has the instant counter to shut that down. Same with Hogger E. If Alarak is fast enough, he can negate Hogger's E and silence him. And same with any channel, right? If you're against a Ragnaros, he's trying to Molten Core behind his Fort Gate. If you have vision of him, you can interrupt his Molten Core a lot of the time, quite safely as well. But again, that's part of thinking about Alarak's W in a different way. It is extremely strong. And its uses are honestly nearly endless, also because you can push yourself. You can throw yourself in front of enemies to body block them. You can W people through yourself as well. It's a little bit tricky to do so. You have to queue up a move command after casting W to move yourself a little bit forward through the W. But it's reliable if you practice it.
I do see you, you know.
And I think that's it. Unless there are any further questions, I think that is the hour full. Well, I think I'm going to wrap it up here then. Thank you everyone for showing up. Thank you for Fish for helping me think a little bit about the hero and bouncing thoughts. And thank everyone who asked questions. I think I'll leave it here. Thank you and good night.
Thanks for doing this.